One question, were you with him? Can cost you your safety, your future, maybe your life. In a courtyard lit by fire, a loyal friend chooses self-preservation, and 3 times he says the words he swore he'd never say. But what happens when the man he denies turns and looks straight at him? It starts with footsteps in the dark, quick, uneven, trying not to be heard. Jesus has been seized, pulled away into the night, and one of his closest followers trails behind. Not beside him. Not with him. Just close enough to see. And far enough to survive, at least, that's the plan. Luke gives us a small phrase that feels like a crack in the soul: Peter followed at a distance. It's not only geography, it's strategy. Love is still pulling him forward, but fear is setting the boundaries. And those boundaries are about to be tested in the worst possible place, a public courtyard. The courtyard is open air, enclosed by stone, an easy place to feel trapped. In the center, a fire burns, and people sit around it, warming their hands, trading glances, listening for news. Peter slips and sits among them like he belongs there. Warmth first. Questions later. But the light is already doing its work. Firelight is comfort, but it's also exposure. It climbs the planes of your face, catches your eyes, makes you recognizable to strangers who shouldn't know you. Peter keeps his shoulders rounded, his gaze low, as if the posture itself can hide him. Then a servant girl looks up, and her attention lands like a hand on his throat. She says it out loud, simple, public, dangerous: this man also was with him. Not a courtroom accusation. Not a soldier's threat. Just a sentence spoken into the circle of warmth where everyone can hear. Peter's mind does the math in a heartbeat: association equals risk. And fear answers before courage can. Woman, I do not know him. The words leave Peter's mouth quickly, like he's trying to outrun them. He doesn't shout. He doesn't argue. He dismisses, hoping the denial is small enough to pass unnoticed. But denial doesn't shrink danger. It invites the next question, the next look, the next tightening of the circle. Somewhere beyond the courtyard walls, inside the high priest's house, Jesus is being handled, moved, questioned, watched. We don't linger on the violence, we only feel the weight of it through muffled sounds and the way the courtyard keeps listening. Peter keeps staring toward the doorway, trying to be invisible in plain sight. But invisibility is slipping. Another voice cuts through the fire's crackle, confident, casual, like it's obvious: you also are one of them. This time it isn't a servant girl's curiosity. It's a bystander's certainty, the kind that spreads fast in a crowd. Peter feels the eyes again, and his body stiffens as if stillness can erase identity. It can't. Man, I am not. Shorter. Sharper. Less explanation, more rejection. Peter isn't only denying Jesus now, he's denying belonging. He's cutting the thread that ties him to the others, because threads can be followed. And for a moment, it works. The circle loosens. The fire crackles. Life continues, almost normal. And then Luke does something cruelly realistic: he gives Peter time. About an hour. An hour to sit with what he said. An hour to rehearse a safer story. An hour to hope the danger drifts elsewhere. But fear doesn't fade just because you survived the first wave. It waits, quiet, until it can strike again. Look at Peter now, he's still there. He didn't run home. He didn't vanish into the city. He stayed close enough to watch, close enough to ache, close enough to be seen. That's what makes this moment so human: devotion and self-preservation sharing the same body. And the next voice is already forming its sentence. If you've ever felt that pull, wanting to stand with what's right, but calculating the cost, pause and stay with this story. And if you want more episodes like this, subscribe and share it with someone who needs a quiet kind of courage tonight. Because the most devastating moment in this courtyard isn't loud at all, it's almost silent. The third challenge doesn't come immediately. It comes when Peter thinks he's blended in again, when the danger feels manageable. A man steps closer, studying him, not just his face but his sound, his manner, the details you can't easily disguise. And when he speaks, it's not a guess. It's an insistence meant to pin Peter to the wall. Certainly this man also was with him, for he too is a Galilean. Now it's identity on trial. Not just were you there? But we know where you're from. Your roots. Your voice. The things you didn't choose. The courtyard feels smaller, the fire suddenly too bright, and Peter realizes the truth has corners he can't hide behind. This is where fear becomes reflex. Peter doesn't weigh options now, he reacts. Man, I do not know what you are talking about. It's the strongest denial yet, not only disassociation but confusion, as if the accusation itself is absurd. And while the last syllables are still in the air, something interrupts the night like a blade. A rooster crows. Ordinary sound. Common sound. But in this moment it lands like a verdict. The courtyard doesn't need a judge's gavel, this is enough. Peter's face changes before anyone else moves, because he remembers words spoken earlier, words he brushed aside with confidence. And memory is a harsher witness than any stranger. He remembers, before the rooster crows today, you will deny me 3 times. Not a curse, an accurate reading of Peter's limits. The prediction wasn't meant to humiliate him, it was meant to prepare him. But preparation only helps if you accept it. And now, with the sound still echoing, the story delivers its quietest, heaviest blow. Luke says, "The Lord turned and looked at Peter." No shout across the courtyard. No speech. No condemnation performed for the crowd. Just a turn of the head, a line of sight cutting through smoke and shadow. Peter, still near the fire, meets that look, and suddenly he's not arguing with strangers anymore. He's seen. Imagine what that look contains: the warning Peter ignored, the love Peter couldn't kill, the truth Peter tried to bury under survival. It isn't theatrical anger. It's steadiness. And that steadiness is what breaks him, because it leaves no room for excuses. Peter has to face his own voice, his own choices, in the presence of Jesus. A lot of people imagine denial as a single dramatic moment. Luke shows it as a slow slide, distance, comfort, blending in, quick lies, then bigger ones. It's the anatomy of compromise, how it starts with "I'll just stay back," and ends with "I don't know him." And once Peter realizes where he's landed, he can't stay by the fire, so he leaves. Luke's detail is simple: Peter went out. Out of the circle. Out of the light. Out of the place where he tried to be safe. He doesn't argue his case. He doesn't negotiate his image. He just exits into the colder dark, because shame always wants privacy. But privacy can also be where truth finally speaks. And there, away from the fire, away from the watching faces, Peter weeps bitterly. Not neat tears. Not a poetic single drop. Bitter weeping, the kind that comes from realizing you weren't who you thought you were when it mattered. The night air takes his breath, and the sound of the rooster still feels like it's inside his chest. This is where we're tempted to turn Peter into a warning label. But Luke doesn't write him as a cartoon coward. He writes him as a man who loved Jesus enough to follow, and feared enough to deny. That mixture is painfully familiar. The question isn't, how could Peter? The question is, where do I keep my distance, and call it wisdom? Because the first denial in this story might not be verbal. It might be the step back. The careful phrasing. The way we stay close enough to watch what's happening, but far enough that no one can connect us. Peter's at a distance becomes a lifestyle in one night. And then, when the questions come, the mouth simply follows the feet. Notice who pressures him: not a tribunal, not a formal interrogation, ordinary people around the fire. That's how fear often works. It doesn't always arrive as persecution, sometimes it arrives as social exposure. A look. A label. A sentence spoken loudly enough for others to hear. And suddenly the cost of being known feels too high for your courage to pay. And then there's that hour. That long pause between the second and third denial. It's the space where Peter could have stood up and left the courtyard with his integrity still intact. But he stays, trying to manage the situation, trying to control the narrative, trying to hold onto warmth without paying for it. The problem is, the story always comes back around. The third accusation lands hardest because it targets something deeper than a face. He's a Galilean. It's the sound of his belonging. It's the trace of where he learned to speak, to pray, to live. Sometimes the world doesn't need proof, you carry your story in your voice. And when your voice incriminates you, denial turns desperate fast. Then the rooster. The sound isn't magical, it's mercilessly normal. That's what makes it terrifying. God can use the ordinary to wake the conscience. A bird's cry becomes a timestamp on Peter's collapse. And immediately after, the look, Jesus turning toward him, proves that Peter's failure isn't hidden, and yet he's still being seen by someone who knows him. That look is the hinge of the whole scene. If Jesus had stared with disgust, Peter might have hardened. If Jesus had looked away, Peter might have pretended it didn't happen. But Luke gives us a look that triggers remembering, truth arriving not as a lecture, but as presence. And when Peter remembers, he finally stops performing and starts grieving. Peter's bitter weeping isn't the end of his story, but tonight we don't rush past it. We let it be what it is, the moment a man realizes he traded loyalty for safety and still didn't feel safe. He wanted warmth, and ended up exposed. He wanted distance, and ended up empty. And in the dark, his tears tell the truth his mouth wouldn't. If you've ever heard yourself say something you didn't believe, just to get through a moment, this courtyard is for you. It's for the person who meant well, who followed, who stayed near, and still collapsed under pressure. Peter doesn't teach us how to be fearless. He teaches us how fragile confidence can be when it hasn't met the fire yet, and maybe that's the mercy hidden inside this scene. Jesus' look doesn't erase the denial, but it does prevent Peter from escaping into denial about the denial. It forces the truth into the open, so healing can start later. For now, all Peter can do is walk into the night with nothing left to defend. And that's where repentance often begins. If this story put words to a moment you've lived, when fear spoke faster than love, tell me in the comments, I broke. And if you want more quiet, honest episodes like this, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Tonight ends with bitter tears in the dark. But it doesn't end with abandonment.